Alright, before reassembling the clutch toggles and dogs and new operating bolts, it's very important to check the clutch operating sleeve, which is this piece right behind the gear that slides back and forth, engaging, disengaging your clutch. The main area to look for is the pin that drives the clutch operating sleeve. That little 3 or 7/16 pin on a 730 or 720 drives the whole tractor, believe it or not. But oftentimes the hole in the operating sleeve that slides on this pin is worn dangerously close to the edge of the operating sleeve. If it is, you're going to have to do some further disassembly, remove that, probably take it to a competent machinist or find a replacement and go that route. So when putting the toggles and the dogs back together, very important to put just a dab of high quality, what I use is Molybdenum based grease, just because it's so sticky and it stays in there for a long time, providing lubrication. And you want to put them on both ends, both the piece in the toggle as well as on the end of the toggles and the operating sleeve and on the dog. Alright, so one of the least fun jobs of repairing your two-cylinder clutch is bending over the cotter keys on I guess the pivot pins for the clutch dogs. It's probably best to get a helper here to avoid busted knuckles, cursing, and or dependence on alcohol. So, but that, all kidding aside, I certainly recommend putting the moly grease on all the pivot points inside your clutch, just to ensure that they're going to be lubricated until you get a wild hair and decide you want to do this all again. Alright, so now it's time to put the clutch facings in your clutch, and starting off, obviously we put the single clutch facing in up against the pulley, and in this case it fits in there nice and it's sitting in there on its own, but that's not always the case. I've had some tractor clutches where the facing wants to fall out, and you do have to be mindful. If the clutch facing were to come out and come down, it could potentially get pinched between the clutch pulley and the clutch drive disc. But just something to watch out for. We're going to go ahead and slide the clutch drive disc on. And with the 70, 720, and 730 series tractors, it's not a problem. We don't have to worry about timing marks. But on just about nearly all the other models of Deere Waterloo-built John Deere tractors, there are timing marks that have to be matched up on the splines of the crankshaft and on the clutch drive disc. And a lot of times it's just indicated by a V mark on both the crank and the clutch driver. If you happen to get your clutch back together and you've got major vibration and you didn't have it before you took the clutch apart, it's almost a guarantee that your clutch driver's out of time, because it actually acts as a counterbalance on your crankshaft. Okay, after tightening the clutch driver onto the crank by means of a 3/4 24-inch pry bar or breaker bar, we went ahead and loosened the bolt, or took the bolt loose and removed it to check for clearance on the end of the crankshaft and the face of the clutch driver. And right here we've got about 3/16 of an inch, or maybe even closer to 1/4 of an inch, which is perfect, meaning probably very likely we have a good crankshaft. For some reason these two surfaces were nearly flush. That would indicate a severe amount of wear on the splines and the crankshaft, and mean that you're probably not gonna want to continue assembling and just hold off and maybe find a new crankshaft for your tractor. Okay, when it comes to assembling the sliding discs and floating discs in your clutch, it's always important to note which way to orient the double bonded disc. You've got pins, which the double bonded disc float on, and then you have your operating bolts with the cotter keys, which the bonded discs do not go on. Had a friend from, let's say, south of the border once that tried to install them backwards and had some major clutch problems. So leaving it at that, we just don't want anyone to experience those sort of clutch problems, because as we know, Mr. Stupid is always waiting around the corner for us to let our guard down and make a mistake. as the friend south of the border found out. So
we did have tacos today.
We did have tacos today, but that just reminded us of the friend. Let's call him Pedro. So as we're assembling the clutch, everything should slide on just nice, but it is a bit tricky sometimes, especially with new clutch driver and sliding disc. And in regards to the single sided facings, one side has slots or grooves cut into it. You can install those without regard to orientation, so you can put them in either way and it's not going to make any difference to the operation of your clutch. Alright, so we've installed new clutch return springs on the outside of the outer clutch disc, and sometimes those you find them just in rusted condition or weak, and about the easiest way to remove them instead of trying to pry them sideways is actually to twist the spring and sort of almost like you're unscrewing a screw. Okay, so when it comes to the single clutch facing, it's easiest to go ahead and put it in the outer clutch disc before sliding it on. Otherwise it's kind of like trying to juggle 10 tennis balls at the same time. Not an easy task. So we're going to go ahead and slide it on. One thing to be mindful of on this model, the springs actually go in between the pins. Rotate it another 20 degrees. There we go. Yeah, it's just like musical chairs. There's only pressure when the video's rolling, you know. That was a resident mouse chaser knocking some stuff over in the shop. And sometimes these can be a little tight, just depending. But we like a good tight clutch. So you kind of have to hold everything in, compress the springs just enough to get ready to put the bevel washers, and then of course the castellated nuts. And JJ, what was the important thing you wanted to remind everybody about the washers? Was it proper orientation of the washers?
Yeah, you want to have the beveled edge of the pointing out.
Pointing out. Yeah, so
it's coned out away. The cone part is up against the nut, and the wider part is up against the outer clutch.
Right. Yeah, just making sure that it's going to ensure it'll last a little longer. And the reason we put these bevel washers on is to provide just a little extra spring or snap when you engage and disengage the clutch. Deere actually offered them as a service part in the service bulletins in the late 50s as a remedy for a jumpy clutch. So this should help alleviate that. Granted, this is a brand new clutch, but something to, yeah, just a little trivia fact.